Welcome back to Pause Mongolia podcast. For decades, the conversation around animal population management has been fairly consistent. If communities wanted to reduce unwanted litters, improve animal welfare, and prevent population growth, the primarily recommendation was spay and neuter surgery. That approach has been used around the world for many years, and in many cases it has been extremely successful. Millions of animals have benefited from these programs. But an interesting question has started appearing more often in veterinary medicine and animal welfare. Will surgery always be the primary option, or are we beginning to see the development of additional approaches? Researchers aren't necessarily trying to replace surgical sterilization. The conversation is often much more practical than that. The conversation is about options. Different communities face different challenges. Different countries have different resources. Different animal populations present different circumstances. Because of that, researchers have been studying a wide range of possibilities: long-lasting contraceptives, hormonal implants, immunocontraceptive vaccines, temporary fertility suppression, and other approaches that may one day become part of the animal welfare toolkit. Some of these technologies are already being used in limited situations. Others remain under study. Some are still years away from widespread adoption, and some may never become widely used at all. That's simply how science works. Not every idea succeeds. Not every promising technology becomes practical. But what I find encouraging is that people continue exploring new possibilities. Animal welfare has never been a static field, but good thing is veterinary medicine continues to evolve. Scientific understanding continues to evolve too, and the questions researchers ask today are often different from the questions they asked 20 years ago. One reason this topic matters is because animal population management is not only a veterinary issue, it is also a logical issue and financial and educational issue too. And some regions it is geographical issue. In communities with large numbers of free-roaming dogs and cats, scaling traditional surgical programs can be challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. Every surgery requires trained professionals, equipment, facilities, and recovery time. That's one reason researchers have become interested in whether additional options could complement existing approaches. Because discussions in this field are rarely as simple as choosing one solution over another. The reality is usually more complicated. Animal welfare professionals understand that there is rarely a single answer that works everywhere, and perhaps that's one of the most important ideas in this entire conversation. The future may not belong to one method. It may belong to combination of methods that can be adapted to different situations, different communities, and different needs. One aspect of this discussion that I find particularly interesting is that it forces us to think about animal welfare differently. For a long time, much of animal welfare has focused on responding to challenges after they appear. An animal arrives at shelter, a litter is born unexpectedly, a community begins struggling with growing free-roaming animal population, then people work incredibly hard to address these situations. Veterinarians, shelters, rescue organizations, volunteers, and local governments often step in and do the best they can with the resources available. That work remains essential, but researchers working on fertility control are asking an additional question. Can some challenges be reduced before they become larger problems? That's not the new question in science. In public health, prevention has always been important. In medicine, prevention is important. In veterinary medicine, prevention is important. The idea isn't to replace existing approaches. The idea is to create more opportunities to prevent unwanted outcomes before they occur. Of course, as soon as people hear about fertility control technologies, the conversation becomes more complicated because they are real questions that deserve careful consideration. How effective are these methods? How long do they last? Are there side effects? How they affect animal behavior? And how they affect long-term health? And what happens when they are used in large populations? These are not minor questions. They are important questions, and that's one reason development takes time. Sometimes people become frustrated when scientific progress appears slow, but when it comes to animal health, caution is not necessarily weakness. In many cases, caution is exactly what responsible science requires. Researchers need evidence. Veterinarians need evidence. Regulators need evidence. Animal welfare organizations need evidence. The goal is not simply to find something new. The goal is to find something that genuinely improves outcomes for animals. That distinction matters because history is full of ideas that initially seemed promising but later revealed limitations. Good science is not about finding support for preferred ideas. Good science is about testing ideas carefully and honestly, and that process often takes years, sometimes decades. Yet, despite these challenges, there has clearly been growing interest in this field. Part of the reason is practical. Traditional surgical sterilization requires significant resources. It requires veterinary expertise. It requires facilities, equipment, recovery time. In many places, these resources are available. In other places, they may be limited. Researchers understand that animal welfare challenges look very different depending on geography, economics, infrastructure, and local circumstances. A strategy that works exceptionally well in one region may be difficult to scale in another. That's why flexibility matters, and flexibility is really what this conversation is about. Not replacing one approach with another, expanding the number of approaches available. I think that's an important point because discussions about animal welfare sometimes become unnecessarily divided. People start treating solutions as competitors, but in reality, different tools often serve different purposes. Veterinarians may use one approach in one situation and completely different approach in another. A community may adopt a strategy that reflects its own needs and resources. A shelter may face challenges that are very different from those faced by rural region. The future may involve combinations of approaches rather than single universal solution. And perhaps that's exactly what progress looks like. Not simplicity, but flexibility. Not answers, but better options. Other things worth considering is now how dramatically veterinary medicine has changed over the past several decades. Procedures that once seemed impossible become routine. Treatments that were unavailable become standard practice. Diagnostic tools become more advanced. Medical knowledge expanded. The field continues evolving, and there is every reason to believe that evolution will continue. Nobody knows exactly what animal population management will look like 20 years from now, but history suggests that it probably won't look identical to today. New questions will emerge, new technologies will emerge, new evidence will emerge, and animal welfare professionals will continue adapting as knowledge grows. What I found encouraging is that the underlying goal remains remarkably consistent. Regardless of the method being discussed, the objective is the same: the reducing suffering, improving animal welfare, supporting healthier communities, creating more sustainable long-term outcomes. These goals have not changed. The tools may change, the science may change, but the mission remains remarkably similar, and perhaps that's why this field continues attracting attention from researchers, veterinarians, and animal welfare advocates around the world, because the stakes are significant. The decisions made today can influence animal welfare for years to come, not only for individual animals, but for entire populations. And that's why thoughtful research matters. Several organizations and researchers are already working in this area. One example is ACCND, the Alliance for Contraception in Cats and Dogs, a US-based nonprofit organization that supports research and development of non-surgical fertility control methods for dogs and cats. Researchers are currently exploring a variety of approaches, including contraceptive implants, immunocontraceptive vaccines, and other fertility control technologies. Some products, such as Suprelorin, are available in certain countries for specific uses, while other technologies remain under development or are still moving through research and regulatory processes. It's important to note that many of these approaches are not yet widely available worldwide. Different countries have different approval systems, veterinary regulations, and animal health requirements. Researchers are also continuing to study long-term effectiveness, safety, cost, and potential side effects. So while these technologies are promising, they should be viewed as developing tools rather than complete solutions. That makes this field interesting is not that every product will succeed. That makes it interesting is that researchers, veterinarians, and animal welfare organizations are continuing to expand the number of options available for future animal population management. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I think one of the most interesting takeaways is that the future of animal welfare may not be about finding one perfect solution. It may be about developing better options, better science, better tools, and better understanding of what works in different situations. The technologies being discussed today may look very different 10 or 20 years from now. Some will succeed, some won't. New approaches will emerge, and researchers, veterinarians, and animal welfare professionals will continue learning along the way. That's how progress usually happens, not through a single breakthrough, but through many small improvements over time. For me, that's what makes this topic so interesting, not because we already have all the answers, but because people are continuing to ask important questions and look for better ways to improve animal welfare. Thank you so much for spending parts of your day with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and write a review, because review helps the podcast reach new listeners, improve visibility, and allow more people to discover these conversations. You can also visit our website www.pausmongolia.org. Thank you so much for listening Paus Mongolia podcast. Follow this podcast, write a review, and share it with your friends and family. Together, we can grow this podcast and bring more awareness and compassion into the world.